1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. Book 2, Chapter 16. Tango, like a ghost ship. What kind of world will be there tomorrow? No one knows the answer to that, fuka-eri said. But the world to which Tengo awoke did not appear especially changed from the world that he had seen as he fell asleep the night before. The bedside clock said it was just after 6. Outside, it was fully light, the air perfectly clear. A wedge of light came in through the curtains. Summer was winding down, it seemed. The cries of the birds were sharp and clear. Yesterday's violent thunderstorm felt like an apparition or something else that had happened in an unknown place in the distant past. The first thing that came to Tengo's mind upon waking was that fuka-eri might have disappeared during the night. But no, there she was, next to him, sound asleep, like a little animal in hibernation. Her face was beautiful in sleep, a few narrow strands of black hair against her white cheek forming a complex pattern, her ears hidden. Her breathing was soft. Tengo stared at the ceiling for a while, listening. Her breathing sounded like a tiny bellow. He retained a vivid tactile memory of last night's ejaculation. He had actually released semen, a lot of semen, inside this young girl. The thought made his head swim. But now that morning was here, it seemed as unreal as that violent storm, like something had happened in a dream. He had experienced wet dreams several times in his teens. He would have a realistic sexual dream, ejaculate, and then wake up. The events had all happened in the dream, but the release of semen was real. What he felt now was a lot like that. It had not been a wet dream, though. He had unquestionably come inside fuka-eri. She had deliberately penetrated herself with his penis and squeezed every drop of semen out of him. He had simply followed her lead. He had been totally paralyzed at the time, unable to move a finger. And as far as he was concerned, he was coming while in the elementary school classroom, not in fuka-eri, who later told him there was no chance she had become pregnant because she had no periods. He couldn't fully grasp that such a thing had actually happened, but it had actually happened, as a real event in the real world, probably. He got out of bed, got dressed, went to the kitchen, boiled water, and made coffee. While making coffee, he tried to put his head in order, like arranging the contents of a desk drawer. He couldn't get things straight, though. All he succeeded in doing was rearranging the items in the drawer, putting the paper clips where the eraser had been, the pencil sharpener where the paper clips had been, and the eraser where the pencil sharpener had been, exchanging one form of confusion for another. After drinking a fresh cup of coffee, he went to the bathroom and shaved while listening to a Baroque music program on the FM radio. Telemann's partitas for various solo instruments. This was his normal routine, making coffee in the kitchen, drinking it, and shave while listening to Baroque music for you on the radio. Only the musical selections changed each day. Yesterday it had almost certainly been Rameau's keyboard music. The commentator was speaking. Telemann won high praise throughout Europe in the early 18th century, but came to be disdained as too prolific by people in the 19th century. This was no fault of Telemann's, however. The purposes for which music is composed underwent great changes as the structures of European society changed, leading to this reversal in his reputation. Is this the new world? He wondered. He took another look at his surroundings. Still, there was no sign of change. For now, there was no sign of disdainful people. In any case, what he had to do was shave. Whether the world had changed or not, no one was going to shave for him. He would have to do it himself. When he was through shaving, he made some toast, buttered and ate it, and drank another cup of coffee. He went into the bedroom to check on fuka-eri, but she was still in a very deep sleep, it seemed. She hadn't moved at all. Her hair still formed the same pattern on her cheek. Her breathing was as soft as before. For the moment, he had nothing planned. He would not be teaching at the cram school. No one would be coming to visit. Nor did he have any intention of visiting anyone. He could spend the day any way he liked. Tengo sat at the kitchen table and continued writing his novel, filling in the little squares on the manuscript paper with a fountain pen. As always, his attention became focused on his work. Switching channels in his mind made everything else disappear from his field of vision. It was just before 9 when fuka-eri woke. She had taken off his pajamas and was wearing one of Tengo's t-shirts, the Jeff Beck Japan Tour t-shirt he was wearing when he visited his father in Chikura. Her nipples showed clearly through the shirt, which could not help but revive in Tengo the feeling of last night's ejaculation, the way a certain date brings to mind related historical facts. The FM radio was playing a Marcel Dupré organ piece. Tengo stopped writing and fixed her breakfast. fuka-eri drank Earl Grey tea and ate strawberry jam on toast. She devoted as much time and care to spreading the jam on the toast as Rembrandt had when he painted the folds in a piece of clothing. I wonder how many copies your book has sold, Tengo said. You mean Air Crystallis? fuka-eri asked. Uh-huh. I don't know, fuka-eri said, lightly creasing her brow. A lot. Numbers were not important to her, Tengo thought. Her a lot brought to mind clover growing on a broad plain as far as the eye could see. The clover suggested only the idea of a lot, but no one could count them all. A lot of people are reading Air Crystallis, Tengo said. Saying nothing, fuka-eri inspected how well she had spread the jam on her toast. I'll have to see Mr. Komatsu as soon as possible, Tengo said, looking at fuka-eri across the table. As always, her face showed no expression. You have met Mr. Komatsu, haven't you? At the press conference. Did you talk? Fuka-eri gave her head a slight shake, meaning they had hardly talked at all. Tengo could imagine the scene vividly. Komatsu was talking his head off at top speed, saying everything he was thinking or not thinking, while she hardly opened her mouth and listened to what he had to say. Komatsu was not concerned about that. If anyone ever asked Tengo for a concrete example of two perfectly incompatible personalities, he would name fuka-eri and Komatsu. Tengo said. I haven't seen Mr. Komatsu for a very long time, and I haven't heard from him either. He must be very busy these days. Ever since Air Crystallis became a bestseller, he's been swept up in the circus. It's about time, though, for us to get together and have a serious talk. We've got all kinds of problems to discuss. Now would be a good chance to do that, since you're here. How about it? Want to see him together? The three of us? Uh-huh. That'd be the quickest way to settle things. Fuka-eri thought about this for a moment. Or else, she was imagining something. Then she said, I don't mind, if we can. If we can, Tengo repeated, mentally. It had a prophetic sound. Are you thinking we might not be able to? Tengo asked, with some hesitation. Fuka-eri did not reply. Assuming we can, we'll meet him. Are you okay with that? Meet him and do what? Meet him and do what? Well, first I'll return some money to him. A fairly good-sized payment was transferred into my bank account the other day for my rewriting of Air Crystallis, but I'd rather not take it. Not that I have any regrets about having done the work. It was a great inspiration for my own writing and guided me in a good direction, and it turned out pretty well, if I say so myself. It's been well received critically and the book is selling. I don't believe it was a mistake for me to take it on. I just never expected it to blow up like this. Of course, I am the one who agreed to do it, and I certainly have to take responsibility for that, but I just don't want to be paid for it. Fuka-eri gave his shoulders a little shrug. Tengo said, You're right. It might not change a thing, but I'd like to make it clear where I stand. Who for? Well, mainly for myself, Tengo said, lowering his voice somewhat. Fuka-eri picked up the lid of the jam jar and stared at it, as if she found it fascinating. But it may already be too late, Tengo said. Fuka-eri had nothing to say to that. When Tengo tried phoning Komatsu's office after 1 o'clock, Komatsu never came to work in the morning. The woman who answered said that Komatsu had not been in for the past several days. That was all she knew, or if she knew more, she obviously had no intention of sharing it with Tengo. He asked her to connect him with another editor he knew. Tengo had written short columns under a pseudonym for the monthly magazine edited by this man, who was 2 or 3 years older than Tengo, and generally well disposed toward him, in part because they had graduated from the same university. Komatsu has been out for over a week now, the editor said. He called in on the 3rd day to say he wouldn't be coming to work for a while because he wasn't feeling well, and we haven't seen him since. The guys in the book division are going crazy. He's in charge of the Air Crystallis, and so far he's handled everything himself. He's supposed to restrict himself to the magazine side of things, but he ignored that fact and hasn't let anybody else lay a finger on this project, even when it went into book production. So, if he takes off now, nobody knows what to do. If he's really sick, I suppose there's nothing we can say, but still. What's wrong with him? I don't know. All he said was he's not feeling well. And then he hung up. Haven't heard a word from him since. We wanted to ask him a few things and tried to call him, but all we got was the answering machine. Nobody knows what to do. Doesn't he have a family? No, he lives alone. He used to have a wife and a kid, but I'm pretty sure he's been divorced for a long time. He doesn't tell anybody anything, so I don't really know, but that's what I've heard. Anyhow, it's strange that he's been out for a week, and you've only heard from him once. Well, you know Komatsu. common sense isn't really his thing. Receiver in hand, Tengo thought about this remark. It's true. You never know what he'll do next. He's socially awkward and he can be self-centered, but as far as I know, he's not irresponsible about his work. I don't care how sick he is. He wouldn't just let everything go and not contact the office when Air Crystallis is selling like this. He's not that bad. You're absolutely right, the editor said. Maybe somebody should go to his place and see what's up. There was all that trouble with Sakigake over fuka-eri's disappearance, and we still don't know where she is. Something might have happened. I can't believe he'd fake being sick so he could take off from work and hide out with fuka-eri, right? Tengo said nothing. He could hardly tell the man that fuka-eri was right there in front of him, cleaning her ears with a cotton swab. And not just this case, everything involving this book. I don't know. There's something wrong with it. We're glad it's selling so well, but there's something about it that's not quite right. And I'm not the only one. A lot of people at the company feel that way about it. Oh, by the way, Tengo, did you have something you wanted to talk to Komatsu about? No, nothing special. I haven't talked to him for a while, so I was just wondering what he's up to. Maybe the stress of it all finally got to him. Anyhow, Air Crystallis is the first bestseller this company has ever had. I'm looking forward to this year's bonus. Have you read the book? Of course. I read the manuscript when it was submitted for the competition. Oh, that's right. You were a screener. I thought it was well written and pretty interesting too. Oh, it's interesting all right, and well worth a read. Tengo detected an ominous ring in his remark. But something about it bothers you. Well, this is just an editor's intuition. You're right, it is well written. A little too well written for a debut by a 17-year-old girl. And now she's disappeared, and we can't get in touch with her editor. The book is like one of those old ghost ships with nobody aboard. It just keeps sailing along, all sails set, straight down the bestseller seaway. Tengo managed a vague grunt. It's creepy, mysterious, too good to be true. This is just between you and me, but people around here are whispering that Komatsu himself might have fixed up the manuscript more than common sense would allow. I can't believe it, but if it's true, we could be holding a time bomb. Maybe it was just a series of lucky coincidences. Even so, good luck can only last so long, the editor said. Tengo thanked him and ended the call. After hanging up, Tengo said to fuka-eri, Mr. Komatsu hasn't been to work for the past week. They can't get in touch with him. Fuka-eri said nothing. The people around me seem to be disappearing one after another, Tengo said. Still, fuka-eri said nothing. Tengo suddenly recalled the fact that people lose 50 million skin cells every day. The cells get scraped off, turned into invisible dust, and disappear into the air. Maybe we're nothing but skin cells as far as the world is concerned. If so, there's nothing mysterious about somebody suddenly disappearing one day. I may be next, Tengo said. Fuka-eri gave her head a tight little shake. Not you, she said. Why not me? Because I did a purification. Tengo contemplated this for several seconds without reaching a conclusion. He knew from the start that no amount of thinking could do any good. Still, he could not entirely forego the effort to think. In any case, we can't see Mr. Komatsu right now. Tango said, "and I can't give the money back to him." "The money is no problem," Fuka-eri said. "Then what is the problem?" Tango asked. Of course, he did not receive an answer. Tango decided to follow through on last night's resolution to search for Aomame. If he spent the whole day in a concentrated effort, he could at least be able to come up with some kind of clue. But in fact, it turned out not to be that easy. He left Fuka-eri in his apartment after warning her repeatedly not to open the door for anyone, and went to the telephone company's main office, which had a complete set of telephone books for every part of the country available for public use. He went through all the phone books for Tokyo's 23 central wards, looking for the name Aomame. Even if he didn't find Aomame herself, a relative might be living there, and he could ask that person for news of Aomame. But he found no one with the name Aomame. He broadened his search to include the entire Tokyo metropolis and still found no one. He further broadened his search to include the entire Kanto region, the prefectures of Chiba, Kanagawa, and Saitama. At that point, his time and energy ran out. After glaring at the phone book's tiny type all day, his eyeballs were aching. Several possibilities came to mind. 1. She was living in a suburb of the city of Utashinai on Hokkaido. 2. She had married and changed her name to Ito. 3. She kept her number unlisted to protect her privacy. 4. She had died in the spring 2 years earlier from a virulent influenza. There must have been any number of possibilities besides these. It didn't make sense to rely strictly on the phone books. Nor could he read every one in the country. It could be next month before he finally reached Hokkaido. He had to find another way. Tango bought a telephone card and entered a booth at the telephone company. From there, he called the old elementary school in Ichikawa and asked the female office worker who answered the phone to look up the address they had on file for Aomame, saying he wanted to reach her on Alumni Association business. The woman seemed kind and unhurried as she went through the roster of graduates. Aomame had transferred to another school in the 5th grade and was not a graduate. Her name therefore did not appear in the roster, and they did not know her current address. It would be possible, however, to find the address to which she moved at the time. Did he want to know that? Tango said that he did want to know that. He took down the address and telephone number. Care of Koji Tasaki in Tokyo's Adachi Ward. Aomame had apparently left her parents' home at the time. Something must have happened. Figuring it was probably hopeless, Tango tried dialing the phone number. As he had expected, the number was no longer in use. It had been 20 years, after all. He called information and gave them the address and the name Koji Tasaki, but learned only that no telephone was listed under that name. Next, Tango tried finding the phone number for the headquarters of the Society of Witnesses, but no contacts were listed for them in any of the phone books he perused. Nothing under Before the Flood, nothing under Society of Witnesses, or anything else of that ilk. He tried the classified directory under religious organizations, but found nothing. At the end of this struggle, Tango concluded that they probably didn't want anyone contacting them. This was, upon reflection, rather odd. They showed up all the time. They'd ring the bell or knock the door, unconcerned that you might be otherwise occupied, be it baking a souffle, soldering a connection, washing your hair, training a mouse to do tricks, or thinking about quadratic functions, and with a big smile invite you to study the Bible with them. They had no problem coming to see you, but you were not free to go see them, unless you are a believer, probably. You couldn't ask them one simple question. This was rather inconvenient. But even if he did manage to find the society's phone number and get in touch with them, it was hard to imagine that such a wary organization would freely disclose information on an individual believer. No doubt they had their reasons for being so guarded. Many people hated them for their extreme, eccentric doctrines and for the close-minded nature of their faith. They had caused several social problems as a result of which their treatment often bordered on persecution. It had probably become second nature for them to protect their community from a less than welcoming outside world. In any case, Tengo's search for Aomame had been shut down, at least for now. He could not immediately think of what additional search methods might remain. Aomame was an unusual name. You could never forget it once you'd heard it. But in trying to trace the footsteps of one single human being who bore that name, he quickly collided with a wall. It might be quicker to go around asking Society of Witnesses members directly. Headquarters would probably doubt his motives and refuse to tell him anything. But if he were to ask some individual member, he felt, they would probably be kind enough to tell him. But Tengo did not know even one member of the Society of Witnesses. Come to think of it, no one from the society had knocked on his door for a good 10 years now. Why did they not come when you wanted them, and come only when you didn't want them? One possibility was to put a classified ad in the paper. Aomame, please contact me immediately. Kawana. Stupid sounding. Tengo couldn't believe that Aomame would bother to contact him even if she saw such an ad. It would probably just end up scaring her away. Kawana was not such a common name either, but Tengo couldn't believe that Aomame would still remember it. Kawana, who's that? She simply wouldn't contact him. And besides, who read classified ads anyway? Another approach might be to hire a private detective. They should know how to look for people. They have their methods and connections. The clues Tengo already had might be enough for them to find her right away, and it probably wouldn't be too expensive. But that might be something to set aside as a last resort, Tengo thought. He would try a little harder to see what he could come up with himself. When the daylight began to fade, he went home to find fuka-eri sitting on the floor, listening to records. Old jazz records left by his girlfriend. Record jackets were spread on the floor. Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman, Billie Holiday. Spinning on the turntable, just then, was Louis Armstrong singing Chantez les Bas, a memorable song. It reminded him of his girlfriend. They had often listened to this one between bouts of love-making. Near the end, the trombonist, Trummy Young, gets carried away, forgets to end his solo at the agreed-upon point, plays an extra 8 bars. Here, this is the part, his girlfriend had explained to him. When it ended, it was Tengo's job to get out of bed, naked, go to the next room, and turn the LP over to play the second side. He felt a twinge of nostalgia recalling those days. Though he never thought the relationship would last forever, he had not expected it to end so abruptly. Tengo felt odd seeing fuka-eri listening intently to the records that Kyoko Yasuda had left behind. Wrinkling her brow in complete concentration, she seemed to be trying to hear something beyond the old music, straining to see the shadow of something in its tones. "You like this record?" "I listened to it a lot," Fuka-eri said. "Is that okay?" "Sure, it's okay. But aren't you bored here all by yourself?" Fuka-eri gave her head a little shake. "I have stuff to think about." Tengo wanted to ask Fuka-eri what had happened between them during the thunderstorm. Why did you do that? He couldn't believe that Fuka-eri had any sexual desire for him. It must have been an act that somehow took shape unconnected with sex. If so, what possible meaning could it have had? Even if he asked her about it outright, though, he doubted he would receive a straight answer, and Tengo couldn't quite bring himself to broach a subject like that on such a peaceful, quiet September evening. It was an act that had been performed in hiding at a dark hour, in a dark place, in the midst of a raging thunderstorm. Brought out into everyday circumstances, the nature of its meaning might change. So Tengo approached the question from a different angle, one that admitted a simple yes or no answer. "You don't have periods?" "No," was Fuka-eri's curt reply. "You've never had even one?" "No, not even one." "This may be none of my business, but you're 17 years old. It's probably not normal that you've never had a period." Fuka-eri gave a little shrug. "Have you seen a doctor about it?" Fuka-eri shook her head. "It wouldn't do any good." "Why wouldn't it do any good?" Fuka-eri did not answer. She gave no sign that she had even heard the question. Maybe her ears had a special valve that sensed a question's appropriateness or inappropriateness, opening and closing as needed, like a mermaid's gills. "Are the little people involved in this too?" Tengo asked. Again, no answer. Tengo sighed. He couldn't think of anything else to ask that would enable him to approach a clarification of last night's events. The narrow, uncertain path gave out at that point, and only a deep forest lay ahead. He checked his footing, scanned his surroundings, and looked up to the heavens. This was always the problem with talking to Fuka-eri. All roads inevitably gave out. A Gilyak might be able to continue on even after the road ended, but for Tengo it was impossible. Instead, he brought up a new subject. "I'm looking for a certain person," he said. "A woman." There was no point in talking about this to Fuka-eri. Tengo was fully aware of that, but he wanted to talk about it to someone. He wanted to hear himself telling someone, anyone, what he was thinking about Aomame. Unless he did so, he felt Aomame would grow even more distant from him. "I haven't seen her for 20 years. I was 10 when I last saw her. She and I are the same age. We were in the same class in elementary school. I've tried different ways of finding her without any luck." The record ended. Fuka-eri lifted it from the turntable, narrowed her eyes and sniffed the vinyl a few times, then handling it carefully by the edges so as not to leave fingerprints on it, she slipped it into its paper envelope and slid the envelope into the record jacket, gently, lovingly, like transferring a sleeping kitten to its bed. "You want to see this person?" Fuka-eri asked, without a question mark. "Yes. She is very important to me." "Have you been looking for her for 20 years? Fuka-eri asked. "No, I haven't," Tengo said. While searching for the proper words to continue, Tengo folded his hands on the table. "To tell you the truth, I just started looking for her today." "Today," she said. "If she's important to you, why have you never looked for her until today?" Tengo asked for Fuka-eri. "Good question." Fuka-eri looked at him in silence. Tengo put his thoughts into some kind of order. Then he said, "I've probably been taking a long detour. This girl named Almame has been, how should I put this, at the center of my consciousness all this time, without a break. She has functioned as an important anchor to my very existence. In spite of that fact, I guess I haven't been able to fully grasp her significance to me, precisely because she has been all too close to the center." Fuka-eri stared at Tengo. It was impossible to tell from her expression whether this young girl had the slightest comprehension of what he was saying. But that hardly mattered. Tengo was half talking to himself. "But it has finally hit me. She is neither a concept, nor a symbol, nor a metaphor. She actually exists. She has warm flesh and a spirit that moves. I never should have lost sight of that warmth and that movement. It took me 20 years to understand something so obvious. It always takes me a while to think of things, but this is a little too much. It may already be too late, but one way or another, I want to find her." With her knees to the floor, Fuka-eri straightened up, the shape of her nipples showing through the Jeff Beck t-shirt. "A-o-ma-me," Fuka-eri said slowly, as if pondering each syllable. "Yes, green peas. It's an unusual name." "You want to meet her?" Fuka-eri asked, without a question mark. "Yes, of course I want to meet her," Tengo said. Fuka-eri chewed her lower lip as she took a moment to think about something. Then she looked up as if she had hit upon a new idea and said, "She might be very close by." End of chapter.